During the process of researching this story, there were a couple parts that hit me and got me a bit choked up. And the biggest one of these was actually caught on body cam footage from one of the first responders. So every time I see that, it hits me and I get choked up. So fair warning, when you get to that point, you might shed a tear. If you enjoy stories about heroes and what they did in real life to make them heroes, then go ahead and hit all the buttons. Make sure you're subscribed. You've got the notifications on so you don't miss any future uploads. And now for today's hero. In the late evening hours of July 10th of 2022, Nicholas Bostic was at home with his girlfriend, Kara Lewis, but things that night between the couple weren't exactly tension-free. In fact, they were arguing over something that was actually kind of petty, but tensions rose, and Nick got to the point where he just had to leave. He needed to go for a drive, and he wanted to clear his head. At some point when Nick is in the car driving, he notices that the gas gauge was showing that his car is low on fuel. So he goes to a gas station, he fills up the car with gas, and then he goes to this empty parking lot of this auto parts store just to have some peace and quiet, and he ends up looking at the stars for about 15 minutes or so. Then when Nick decides that he's feeling a little bit better, his mind is more clear, he decides to leave the parking lot, and he's driving down Union Street in Lafayette, Indiana. So then while Nick is driving down Union Street, it's just after midnight now, so technically it's July 11th, early morning hours. Nick drives by this house, and he sees something out of the corner of his eye that doesn't really register until after a few seconds pass, and then he realizes that what he saw out of the corner of his eye was this house was on fire. He notices that the porch of this house is going up in flames. Now, Nick does not have his cell phone with him. He actually left it in the apartment on purpose because with the argument that he had with Kara, he did not want to have Kara contact him when he's out trying to clear his head. So Nick driving by this house that he clearly sees is on fire, he can't even contact the authorities right now and alert them that there's a fire. So without having his cell phone on him, Nick just reacts, almost without thinking. Just a reaction. He slams on his brakes, he turns the wheel, he pulls a 180, and he drives back to the house, and he actually pulls into the driveway. Once he's in the driveway, he gets out of the car, and he's immediately regretting the fact that he doesn't have his cell phone on him, because he has no way to call 911. He sees the flames of this fire climbing up the wall of the porch that's in the front of this house, and without a cell phone, without any way to alert the authorities, he just starts yelling into the night, "Help! This house is on fire!" He sees a car that's driving down Union Street and passes by, and he tries to flag this car down, tries to wave it down, but unfortunately this doesn't work. The car goes right by, it doesn't stop. So unfortunately, Nick doesn't have any success in trying to get anybody to help. It is after midnight. He can't get anybody to stop on the road. People are not exactly outside, so he springs into action. Nick runs to the back of the house. He finds a door, but he's sure that this door is going to be locked. But to his surprise, as Nick checks the doorknob, it's unlocked. So Nick, still in reaction mode, he opens the door, he goes inside the house and just starts yelling in case there's anybody in there that this house is on fire and anybody in here needs to get out now. And as he's yelling, he didn't get an answer right away, which makes him think just for a split second that maybe if there was anybody in this house, it's possible that they could have already evacuated. Maybe that's why the door was unlocked. Maybe they already got out of the house. But quickly thinking not to leave anything to chance, he decides to push forward in the home just in case there could be somebody still in the house. Now, backing up just a little bit, the parents of the family that lives in this house, David and Tierra Barrett, they're not at home because it's date night. So they're actually down the street and they don't have any idea that their house is on fire. So they leave their 18-year-old daughter, and I apologize if I butcher this name, it's Seonna. I'm gonna say Siona. They leave her in charge of her younger siblings, and they actually have someone else there, a friend of one of her younger siblings who's there for a sleepover. Keep in mind, it's just after midnight, so everybody was already in bed. Now, Siona was actually awoken by what she thought was the sound of some kind of an explosion. And she notices that there's smoke in her room, and in the living room, which is right next to her room, is actually on fire. And at first, she thought that this might be just a dream, that she's just dreaming this, until she's woken up enough to realize that, oh my gosh, this is for real. The house is on fire. I need to get everybody out of the house. So as soon as Siona realizes this, the 18-year-old, she jumps out of bed, she runs upstairs to her 1-year-old sister named Kalea and gets Kalea out of the crib. Then as soon as she grabs the 1-year-old, she darts to the next room, to her younger sister Shaylee's room, one of the 13-year-olds, and this is the one that has her friend over, another 13-year-old, and they were fast asleep until Siona started yelling at them to wake up. The house is on fire. So once Siona wakes up these two 13-year-olds, she goes to the next room, which is the room of her 6-year-old sister, Kaylani, and her heart sinks because Kaylani is not there. She's not in her room. So this is about the point when Nick is in the house and he starts yelling for people, and he pushes through the heat and the smoke, and he gets to the bottom of the stairs and he's yelling for people that the house is on fire and they need to get out. So Nick starts going up the stairs, and he only makes it to about the second or third stair when he looks up and he sees 4 faces looking down at him that are coming out of their rooms, and they have shocked looks on their faces. So as soon as Nick sees them, he tells them again that they need to get out. And so he helps guide them down the stairs. They run past Nick, and Nick follows behind them as they go out the back door, the same door that Nick came in. Once the 5 of them got outside, they were standing in a circle, and Nick asks, "Is there anyone left in the house?" And Siona, the 18-year-old, says, "Yes, there's a baby in there," referring to her 6-year-old sister, Kaylani. But nobody knew exactly where Kaylani was at this point. So with this information, without even hesitating a little bit, Nick turns right around, goes right back into this burning house, and he doesn't even know where to look for Kaylani. By this time, as Nick goes back into the house, the whole side of the house is on fire with this thick, nasty black smoke billowing up to the ceiling and swirling back down. So the fire is building and the heat is building. And the first place that Nick decides to check was the same place that he found these other 4. So he goes all the way up the stairs, and he starts going from room to room, and not just peeking his head in, but he's actually going in the room, he's checking under the beds, he's looking in the closets to find this 6-year-old girl. But once he finishes searching all the upstairs rooms, he still didn't find Kaylani. So Nick knows at this point that he has to go back downstairs and search the main floor. And as he gets to the top of the stairs, he looks down. That stairwell just looked like this swirling black lagoon of this just nasty black smoke. So Nick doesn't think that it's possible to even go this way, because he can't even see down there anymore. The smoke is already so thick, and it's very unnerving. So when Nick started to go down the stairs and he saw that, it made him turn back. And so Nick makes his way to this window on the side of the house that he was going to get out, when he starts to hear the sound of this faint whining and crying, and he knew that it was coming from downstairs. And so at this point, Nick was really feeling that he was put there at this place at this time to get that baby out. So as frightening of a scene as it was to look down this stairwell with this nasty black smoke, Nick knew that he had to go this way. So remaining calm, Nick takes his shirt and he puts it over his face, he puts it over his nose, and he puts it over his mouth, and he starts to head down this dark, dark stairwell. And as he does so, he closes his eyes, because anybody that's been around a campfire, and you know when the wind kind of shifts a little bit and you get that smoke in your face, it stings your eyes like crazy, you can't breathe, you start coughing. And now Nick is literally going into something that is much worse than that, because a house fire, imagine all the things in your house. When a lot of those things catch fire, that smoke is so much more toxic, which is exactly why firefighters do not enter a burning building without their special equipment, because the number 1 cause of death in a house fire is from smoke inhalation. And so Nick is going into this with his shirt over his face, with his eyes closed, and he said even if he wanted to open his eyes, there's no way he could see anything, because it was so dark he couldn't even see what was right in front of him. And the fire was so hot at this point, Nick said that it felt like he was literally walking into an oven. In fact, it was so hot he noticed that the curtains inside the house were melting. When Nick reached the bottom of the stairs and reached the ground floor, he gets down on all fours and starts to crawl with his eyes still closed, with his hand out in front of him trying to feel his way around. So letting his ears guide him as he's crawling around, he follows the sound of that faint crying and whining, determined to find that little girl. So Nick keeps pushing through, the fire is raging, and there's this hot burning ash that's going through the air that on his exposed skin, it's hitting him and burning his skin. But Nick just refuses to give up. He's on a mission, and he feels like he is there to get that little girl out. So using his ears to guide him and continuing to push through, he finally finds this 6-year-old girl, and he scoops her up, he turns around and starts to head out. He starts heading back towards the back door, or at least where he thinks the back door should be. But Nick is very disoriented at this point, and he ends up kind of lost in this house that he's never been in before, with smoke all around him and he can't see anything. So the back door, unfortunately, is not where Nick thought it was, but he does manage to find the stairs and sees the light from the window that's up there that he found when he was up there before searching for Kaylani. So Nick charges up that stairwell, holding Kaylani in his arms, and as he gets to the last stair, he trips and he falls. But knowing that every second counts, he quickly gets up, still has Kaylani in his arms, and heads towards that window. And when he makes it to that window, the window has curtains on it, it's got blinds on it, and they're kind of in the way. So Nick starts ripping down the blinds from the window, and in the process of doing so, as he's ripping down the blinds, the pull cords from the blinds that help you open and close them, well, they get wrapped around the ankle of this 6-year-old Kaylani. Thankfully, Nick realizes this, he continues to remain calm, and he knows that he needs to slow down a little bit and untangle Kaylani's ankle from these cords in the smoothest and fastest way possible. So he stops what he's doing, he takes the time, and he makes sure that she's completely uncaught, because if he didn't do this, then the next thing that he's about to do wouldn't have gone so well. Once Nick is absolutely sure that neither one of them are caught up in these cords, with his right hand, he punches the window, but the glass doesn't break and his fist just bounces off the window. So still while holding Kehlani in his left hand, he rears back and he gives this window all he's got. This time the window shatters, but it also cuts up Nick's arm pretty badly at the same time when this rush of fresh air just comes in this broken window. Nick then quickly starts clearing out the broken glass that's around the edge of the window and makes it as clear as possible so the glass can't cut them as they go out the window. As they look through the window, down at the ground, there's this stretch of grass that goes up until the neighbor's fence that cuts the property line. And as they look down, Kehlani says to Nick that she doesn't want to jump out the window. And honestly, Nick didn't really want to do that either, but they really had no other choice. So Nick takes a couple of steps back and he launches forward towards the window, and with this 6-year-old girl in his left arm, he jumps out the window shoulders first in a very calculated way. As he's flying through the air, when he jumps out the window, he makes sure he twists his body just the right way so he lands on his right side to make sure that he breaks the fall of Kehlani, who's on his left side. So he acts as a cushion for her. From the fall, Nick ends up injuring more of his arm, he injures his back, he injures his ankle, and first responders are at the house at this point. They actually got there while Nick was in there looking for Kehlani. From the body cam footage of one of the first responders, we can see Nick running from the side of the house with Kehlani in his arms, saying that he can't breathe, he needs oxygen. Kehlani's screaming, giving Kehlani to the first responders and saying that he needs oxygen. And then after that, on the body cam footage, is the part that gets me every time I watch it.
Are you Zaydon?
That's everybody.
Come with me, we gotta get away from the house. Hey.
Is the baby okay? Please tell me that baby's okay.
Yeah, we're good. You did good, dude. Okay?
Please tell me that baby's okay. Such a heroic thing to say. He doesn't care about what state he's in. He wants to make sure that that little girl got out and that she's unharmed. After this point, it was kind of a blur for Nick. He does remember the paramedics tying a tourniquet around him because his arm was bleeding really bad at this point. He remembers being on the gurney and being wheeled into the ambulance, but he has no memory of the trip to the hospital in the ambulance. In the hospital, Nick is treated for severe smoke inhalation and first-degree burns on his arm, his ankle, his leg, and when Nick woke up in the hospital, he had a tube down his throat and he had his girlfriend Kara by his side. Nick still doesn't consider himself a hero. He just said that he did what he would want somebody else to do if he and his family were in the same situation. Nick says that he knew exactly what he was risking that night and he was prepared to give his own life in order to get that little girl out. He even says that he accepted that night that he was probably going to die. Nick fully believes that it was God that put him there to do what he did. Nick says it was the right place, it was the right time, and I guess the right person. After a few days, when Nick was released from the hospital, the Barrett family, they invited him over for dinner once they had a temporary place to stay. David Barrett, the father of the family, said that he wanted to thank the man who saved his family in person. And as soon as David saw Nick for the first time, he just started crying. He gives Nick a huge hug and just says, "Thank you. Thank you." The Barretts welcomed Nick into their family as part of their family, and Nick very gratefully accepts that. Nick received the Carnegie Hero Medal, which is North America's highest honor for civilian heroism. Investigators believe that the cause of the house fire was some ashes put in a bucket on the front porch that weren't fully extinguished, and that ended up spreading, and the propane tank for the grill ended up exploding, which in fact was the explosion that woke up Siona. Nick says that all that pain and suffering that he endured to help this family was so worth it. Nick also said that if he was put in another situation like that, he would surely do it again. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching all the way until the end. I really do appreciate it. Remember to make sure that you're subscribed and you've got your notifications on so you don't miss any future uploads. Thank you so much. See you on the next one.